Emma Williams walked quickly into the towering glass building of Blackwell Enterprises. She was wearing her usual plain white blouse, a black skirt that had seen better days, and simple shoes that carried the weight of her long commutes. Her hair was tied neatly, but without the expensive styling that her colleagues often flaunted. To them, Emma was nothing more than the company's secretary. Invisible, replaceable, forgettable. As she entered the office floor, she could already hear the laughter of some of her coworkers. They weren't laughing with her, they were laughing at her. "Look at her." Clara, one of the senior associates, whispered loudly to another employee. "Same skirt, same blouse, every single day. She probably doesn't even know what designer brands are." The others giggled. Emma kept walking, pretending not to hear. Her hands tightened around the files she was carrying, but she didn't let her frustration show. Years of endurance had taught her how to hide her emotions. Emma moved to her desk, a small wooden table placed near the corner, almost like an afterthought. The shiny desks of other employees seemed to reflect their importance. Hers, however, looked dull and crowded with papers. Still, she sat down, organized the files, and began her work. Every morning was the same routine. She handled phone calls, scheduled meetings, and managed the endless flow of documents that kept the company functioning. The irony was that despite doing much of the crucial work, nobody respected her. To them, she was just the secretary. Clara made sure everyone remembered that. Around mid-morning, Clara walked past Emma's desk, holding a cup of coffee from an expensive cafe downstairs. She stopped, leaned over Emma's desk, and smirked. "Emma, make sure you get the reports sorted before lunch," Clara said, her tone sharp and commanding. "Oh, and please, try not to spill coffee on them like last time. I know you're not used to handling expensive things." Several nearby employees laughed. Emma pressed her lips together, refusing to react. She simply nodded and said, "I'll have them ready, Clara." Her calmness annoyed Clara even more. She wanted Emma to snap, to show weakness, to prove that she was beneath everyone else. But Emma never gave her that satisfaction. During lunch, the office cafeteria filled with chatter. Groups of employees sat together, gossiping and laughing. Emma carried her small homemade meal, a simple sandwich wrapped in foil. She sat alone in the corner. As always, the others noticed. "Poor thing," one employee said mockingly. "Does she even know restaurants exist? She probably can't afford them." Another added. Clara, enjoying the attention, laughed the loudest. "She's just a secretary. What do you expect? Maybe one day she'll marry a janitor and live happily ever after." The table erupted with laughter. Emma's hands shook slightly as she unwrapped her sandwich. Her eyes burned, but she forced herself not to cry. She had cried enough times in the past, hidden in bathroom stalls or on the bus ride home. Not today, not anymore. She looked down at her food and reminded herself why she endured all of this. She wasn't here to impress anyone. She wasn't here for their approval. She was here because she needed this job, and because deep down, she knew something they didn't. Something none of them could ever guess. When lunch ended, Emma returned to her desk. She buried herself in her work, typing quickly, answering calls with precision, sorting files with flawless accuracy. Every movement showed discipline and quiet strength. What no one noticed was the man standing near the glass walls of the top floor, Richard Blackwell, the CEO of the company. He had been watching. Richard was a powerful man, feared and respected by everyone. His presence alone could silence a room. Yet, at that moment, his eyes were fixed on Emma. He saw the way she carried herself despite the constant mockery. He noticed her patience, her resilience, her refusal to break. There was something in Emma that reminded him of the past. A past he kept hidden. But Emma didn't know that. For her, the day ended like any other. She packed her things quietly while others laughed and chatted about evening parties. She walked out of the building alone, the weight of their words heavy on her shoulders. But her steps steady. The city lights shimmered outside as Emma boarded the bus home. She sat by the window, watching people in luxury cars drive past. For a brief moment, sadness clouded her face. Then, just as quickly, determination replaced it. "Let them laugh," she whispered to herself. "One day, they'll see who I really am." The next morning, Emma walked into the office just like every other day. Her plain white blouse and simple black skirt were a sharp contrast to the bright dresses and tailored suits around her. She clutched a folder of reports close to her chest, ignoring the smirks and whispers that followed her down the hallway. But today, something unusual happened. As she reached her desk, she noticed an elegant white envelope placed neatly on top of her papers. Her name, Emma Williams, was written across the front in bold handwriting. She frowned. No one ever left her letters. Carefully, she opened the envelope. Inside was a beautifully printed invitation. Mr. Richard Blackwell requests the pleasure of your presence at the annual Blackwell Enterprises Gala this Saturday evening, 7 p.m., at the Grand Imperial Hotel. Emma's eyes widened. The gala? That was the company's most prestigious event of the year, attended by executives, partners, and even politicians. Regular employees almost never got an invitation, and certainly not secretaries. Clara, who happened to walk by at that moment, noticed the card in Emma's hands. "What's that?" Clara asked sharply. Emma hesitated. "An invitation to the gala." Clara's eyes widened for a second, then narrowed into a glare. She snatched the card out of Emma's hands and read it herself. When she saw Richard Blackwell's signature at the bottom, her face twisted with disbelief. "This has to be a mistake," Clara said, her voice dripping with contempt. "Why would you be invited? The gala is for important people, Emma. People who matter." Several employees nearby turned their heads. Whispers spread across the office like wildfire. The secretary, invited to the gala. It didn't make sense. Emma reached out and calmly took the card back. She placed it in her drawer without saying a word. Her silence infuriated Clara even more. At lunch, the cafeteria buzzed with gossip. "Can you believe it? The secretary got invited." "There's no way. Maybe she's secretly dating someone in management." "No. That's impossible. Look at her. Who would ever?" Clara slammed her coffee cup on the table. "Mark my words. She embarrassed herself. She doesn't even own a proper dress." The laughter echoed across the room, but Emma sat quietly in her corner, eating her sandwich as though nothing had happened. That evening, when she returned home, Emma sat on her small couch with the invitation in her hand. Her apartment was modest, with second-hand furniture and dim lighting. The contrast between her life and the glamorous world of the gala couldn't be greater. For a moment, she considered not going. What if they mocked her again? What if she truly didn't belong? But then she remembered the look in Richard Blackwell's eyes the other day, when he had watched her from his office. He hadn't looked at her with pity. He had looked at her with something else. Recognition. Emma made up her mind. She would go. But there was a problem. She had nothing to wear. The next day after work, Emma stopped at a small boutique hidden in a quiet street. The shop owner, an elderly woman with kind eyes, greeted her warmly. "You look worried, dear. What brings you here?" the woman asked. Emma explained her situation hesitantly. The shop owner listened and then smiled. "I think I have just the thing," she said, disappearing into the back room. Moments later, she returned with a long, elegant gown, simple but breathtaking. The fabric shimmered softly, not overly flashy, but undeniably graceful. Emma's breath caught. "It's beautiful, but I can't afford it." The woman shook her head. "Sometimes, clothes find the person they're meant for. Don't worry about the price. Just promise me you'll walk into that room with your head held high." Tears stung Emma's eyes. She thanked the woman sincerely and left with the gown carefully wrapped in tissue paper. Saturday evening arrived. The Grand Imperial Hotel sparkled with golden lights, and luxury cars lined the entrance. Guests in designer outfits walked confidently up the red carpet, cameras flashing as reporters snapped photos. Inside the ballroom, chandeliers glittered above tables, set with crystal glasses and silver cutlery. Waiters moved gracefully, serving champagne to the elegantly dressed crowd. Suddenly, the doors opened and Emma walked in. Gasps rippled through the room. Gone was the plain secretary everyone mocked. In her place stood a woman of undeniable elegance. Her gown flowed beautifully with each step, her hair framed her face softly, and her eyes glowed with quiet confidence. The whispers began immediately. "Is that Emma? She looks incredible. Where did she even get that dress?" Clara, standing near the buffet, nearly dropped her glass of wine. Her jaw clenched as she watched the room's attention shift toward Emma. For the first time, Clara felt invisible. Emma ignored the stares and walked gracefully through the crowd. She carried herself not as a secretary, but as someone who belonged. And then, the moment came. Richard Blackwell, the CEO himself, approached her. "Emma," he said with a rare smile, "I'm glad you came." The room fell silent. Every guest turned their head, stunned. Richard Blackwell, the most powerful man in the room, was speaking directly to her. Clara's face turned pale. She whispered furiously to her friends. Why is he talking to her? What's going on? Emma simply smiled at Richard. "Thank you for inviting me, sir." But Richard's eyes held a secret, one that would soon change everything. The ballroom glittered with music and laughter. But Emma felt the weight of every eye on her. Guests whispered, stealing glances, confused at why Richard Blackwell, the most powerful man in the room, was speaking so warmly to her. Richard gestured toward the center of the room. "Walk with me, Emma." Her steps were steady, though her heart raced. People moved aside as if guided by an unseen force, making a path for them. Clara's eyes burned with jealousy, her nails digging into her wineglass. "Why her?" Clara hissed to her friend. "What does she have that I don't?" But Clara had no answers. None of them did. At the center of the ballroom, Richard raised his glass. The music softened, and the crowd quieted in anticipation. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice commanding attention, "tonight is not just about business, wealth, or power. Tonight, I want to acknowledge someone special, someone who has walked among us quietly, without seeking attention or recognition." Guests exchanged puzzled looks. Who was he talking about? Richard extended his hand toward Emma. She froze, then slowly stepped forward. "This young woman," he continued, "has been underestimated, mocked and treated unfairly. But none of you know the truth. Emma Williams is my daughter." The room gasped, wine glasses nearly slipped from hands. Someone choked on their champagne. A ripple of shock spread like fire through the ballroom. Clara's mouth fell open. "What?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Emma's breath caught in her throat. "Daughter." The word echoed in her mind, crashing into every memory she carried of her late mother. Her knees nearly buckled, but Richard's hand steadied her. "Yes," Richard said firmly, his eyes scanning the stunned crowd. "Years ago, I made mistakes. Mistakes that kept me from knowing my child. But fate has brought her back into my life. And tonight, I want the world to know Emma is family. She is Blackwell blood." Chaos erupted in the whispers around them. His daughter, the secretary, no wonder she was invited. This changes everything. Clara stumbled back, her face white with disbelief. Just hours ago, she had mocked Emma, calling her plain, ordinary, worthless. And now, the girl she ridiculed was standing next to the billionaire as his heir. Emma's hands trembled, but her voice found strength. She looked up at Richard, searching his eyes for truth. "Why now?" she whispered softly. "Why tell them all this tonight?" Richard's gaze softened. "Because, Emma, it's time the world knew who you are. I don't want to hide it any longer." Emma blinked back tears. She thought of her mother, of all the lonely nights she had wondered about her absent father, of every cruel word Clara and others had thrown at her. And now, here she stood, claimed by the man who once felt like a ghost. The evening took a dramatic turn. Suddenly, reporters pushed forward, snapping pictures. "Mr. Blackwell, is this true? Emma, how do you feel? Will she inherit the company?" Richard raised a hand. "Enough. Tonight is not for questions. Tonight is for family." He placed his arm gently around Emma's shoulders. "From this day forward, Emma is not a secretary. She is part of this legacy." The guests clapped hesitantly, unsure whether to celebrate or fear what this revelation meant. Business partners whispered, calculating how this new heir might affect their deals. But one thing was certain, Emma's life had changed forever. Clara couldn't accept it. She stormed across the ballroom, heels clicking angrily. "This is ridiculous," she shouted, her voice cracking. "She can't be your daughter. Look at her, she's nothing. Just a secretary in cheap shoes." The room fell into tense silence. Richard turned slowly, his expression dark. "Clara." His voice cut like steel. "You should be ashamed. Mocking her was cruel enough, but insulting my daughter, here, in front of everyone, that is unforgivable." Clara froze, her face flushed red. But no." Richard raised his hand sharply. "Leave, now." Gasps filled the air. No one had ever seen Richard Blackwell lose his composure like this. Clara's face twisted with humiliation. She turned and fled the ballroom, whispers chasing her out the door. Emma stood silently, overwhelmed by the storm around her. For years, she had endured Clara's scorn, shrinking herself to survive. And now, Clara had been publicly humiliated. Her power stripped away in seconds. As the night wore on, Emma found herself seated beside Richard at the head table. The shift in how people treated her was immediate. Those who once ignored her now smiled politely, offering compliments and conversation. But Emma noticed their eyes, full of calculation, curiosity, and greed. They weren't truly celebrating her. They were trying to figure out how to use her. Richard leaned close and whispered, "Ignore them. People will always want something from you, but you don't have to give it." Emma nodded, but inside, her emotions swirled. Happiness, anger, confusion, relief. She looked at Richard again, her voice trembling. "Is this real? Am I really your daughter?" Richard's eyes softened. Yes, Emma. And I will spend the rest of my life proving it to you. Emma swallowed hard, her heart aching with emotions she couldn't name. She had dreamed of this moment as a child, of being claimed, of belonging somewhere. Yet, standing here, she also felt the weight of expectations settling on her shoulders. The world now knew who she was, and nothing would ever be the same again. The morning after the gala felt unreal. Emma woke up in her small apartment, the same one she had lived in for years, but the world outside had already changed. News outlets were buzzing with the story. Richard Blackwell reveals secret daughter at gala. Emma Williams, the billionaire's hidden heir. From secretary to heiress. A Cinderella story. Her phone buzzed non-stop with messages, some from old-school friends suddenly wanting to catch up, others from complete strangers showering her with praise or hate. Emma sat at her tiny kitchen table, sipping coffee from a chipped mug. The headlines didn't feel like her. She was still Emma, the girl who bought clothes from thrift shops, the woman who had been mocked and ignored. Yet now, the world saw her as someone else, the billionaire's daughter. A knock on the door startled her. When she opened it, Richard Blackwell stood there in a tailored suit, his driver waiting behind him. "Emma," he said gently, "may I come in?" Emma hesitated, glancing around at her cluttered apartment. It wasn't the place to host someone like him, but Richard didn't seem to care. He stepped inside, taking in the space with quiet curiosity. "You live here?" he asked softly. "Yes," Emma replied, almost defensive. "It's not much, but it's mine." Richard nodded. "It tells me you've built your own life, and that makes me proud." Emma looked at him, unsure whether to trust the sudden warmth. "Why are you here?" "Because yesterday changed everything," he said. "For you? And for me. The world knows who you are now, and I want you by my side. Not as a secretary, as my daughter." Her chest tightened. She had dreamed of hearing those words, yet doubt gnawed at her. "Why now, Richard? Why not years ago?" "My mother raised me alone. She never told me much about you, but I always wondered, where were you?" Richard's eyes clouded with regret. He sat down at the table, folding his hands. "I didn't know. By the time I learned about you, your mother had moved away. I searched, but I couldn't find you. And when fate finally brought us together, I was too much of a coward to tell the truth." Emma swallowed hard, emotions twisting inside her. "So all those months I worked for you, you knew?" Richard nodded slowly. "Yes, I wanted to be sure. I wanted to know who you were, not just as my daughter, but as a person, and you amazed me every day." Emma's hands shook. She wanted to be angry, to scream at him for the years of silence, but she also wanted to believe him. Later that afternoon, Richard insisted she move into his mansion, at least for her safety. Paparazzi were already camping outside her building, cameras ready to capture every move. Reluctantly, Emma packed a small bag and followed him. The mansion loomed like a fortress, grand, intimidating, filled with history. As she stepped inside, servants bowed politely, their eyes filled with curiosity. "This is your home now," Richard said firmly. Emma wandered through marble halls and glittering chandeliers, feeling like an imposter in someone else's life. Every polished surface reflected a version of herself she barely recognized. That evening, Richard introduced her to his lawyer and board members. Words like inheritance, legacy, and shareholder rights floated around her, heavy with responsibility. Emma raised her hands. "Wait, I don't understand all this. I never asked for money or power. I just wanted answers." Richard placed a hand on her shoulder. "I know, but being my daughter means the world will expect things from you. I will guide you, but you must be ready." Emma's head spun. She had entered this ballroom as a nobody, and now she was expected to be an heiress, a businesswoman, a Blackwell. Not everyone welcomed her at dinner that night. Richard's cousin Victoria Sharp, elegant woman-eyed Emma with thinly veiled disdain. "So," Victoria said coolly, "this is the girl who appeared out of nowhere. How convenient." Emma stiffened. "I didn't appear out of nowhere. I've been here all along, just invisible to people like you." Victoria smirked. "Invisibility suits some people." Richard's voice cut through the tension. "That's enough, Victoria. Emma is family. Show her respect." But Emma noticed the glint in Victoria's eyes, the kind that promised more battles ahead. Days turned into weeks. Emma tried to adjust to her new life, but the transition wasn't easy. Every time she entered a boardroom, men twice her age looked at her as if she didn't belong. Reporters chased her relentlessly. Social media dissected her every outfit, her every move. Still, she carried herself with quiet dignity, remembering the humiliation she had endured. That pain became her strength. One evening, While walking through the mansion's library, Emma stopped at a large portrait of Richard in his younger years. He stood tall, powerful, untouchable. "Do I really belong here?" she whispered to herself. Richard appeared behind her, his voice gentle. "Yes, Emma, you belong here more than anyone. But belonging comes with a price. Are you ready to pay it?" Emma turned to him, her eyes burning with determination. "I've already paid a price, Richard. Years of being ignored, mocked, treated like I was nothing. If this is my chance to rise, then I won't waste it." Richard smiled faintly. "Good, because the world will test you, and I want to see you prove them wrong." Emma's reflection in the glass of the portrait looked back at her, not the quiet secretary anymore, not the girl in a simple dress who had been mocked. She was Emma Blackwell now, and her fight was only beginning. The weeks following Emma's revelation as Richard Blackwell's daughter were a storm. Headlines didn't stop. Some praised her as a modern Cinderella, while others mocked her as the accidental heiress. Rumors swirled, enemies whispered, and yet Emma stood tall. Richard had given her access to the company Blackwell Enterprises, but many board members doubted her. They saw her as a girl with no pedigree in business, a charity case who had stumbled into power. Emma knew this was her test. One morning, she entered the boardroom wearing a navy suit Richard had gifted her hair tied neatly, her expression calm. The long table was filled with powerful men and women, their eyes sharp with skepticism. Victoria, Richard's cousin, sat at the far end, her smirk daring Emma to fail. Richard cleared his throat. "As you all know, Emma is my daughter, and as such, she deserves a voice in this company." Murmurs filled the room. One director leaned forward. "With all due respect, Mr. Blackwell, she has no experience. This isn't a fairy tale. Running an empire requires skill." Emma rose slowly, her voice steady. "You're right. This isn't a fairy tale. I've never asked for pity, or for shortcuts. But I've spent years working here quietly, watching, learning. I know more about this company than you think." She opened a folder, laying out documents she had spent nights preparing. "Blackwell Enterprises has been bleeding money in two sectors: shipping and retail. I've studied the numbers. I have solutions, not dreams. Strategies." The room fell silent as she presented a clear, calculated plan to restructure operations, cut losses, and expand into digital markets. Even Victoria's smirk faltered. When Emma finished, she looked around the room. "I may not have your years of experience, but I have something else: perspective. I know what it feels like to be invisible, underestimated, and that's why I'll fight harder than anyone here to prove myself." Richard beamed with pride. "Well said, Emma." The directors exchanged uneasy glances. They couldn't deny her intelligence, her preparation. She had earned her place at the table. But outside the boardroom, the challenges grew sharper. At gala events, journalists asked cruel questions. "Emma, do you feel like a fraud? Are you only here because of your father's name?" Paparazzi followed her every move. Social media ridiculed her outfits, comparing her thrifted style to Victoria's designer gowns. Emma endured it all in silence. She remembered the girl in the simple dress who had been mocked, and she turned that pain into strength. One night, after a long day, she sat in her mansion room, staring at her reflection. "They think I don't belong," she whispered, "but I'll show them." Her chance came sooner than expected. A crisis hit Blackwell Enterprises. An international deal was collapsing, threatening millions in losses. Richard was out of the country, leaving the board in panic. Victoria seized the moment. "This is exactly why Emma doesn't belong here. She's just a girl. What can she possibly do?" Emma stood. "I can fix this." The room laughed, but Emma didn't flinch. Within hours, she flew overseas, meeting partners, she listened to their concerns, offered compromises, and proposed innovative solutions that even seasoned executives had overlooked. Her sincerity, intelligence, and determination won them over. When the deal was saved, headlines shifted. "Heiress Emma Blackwell saves multi-million-dollar contract. The girl they mocked is now the woman they fear." The true triumph came weeks later. Richard hosted a grand charity gala. This time, not to reveal a secret, but to celebrate a legacy. Emma walked into the ballroom in an elegant yet simple gown. Reporters flashing cameras, whispers following her every step. Victoria approached, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Enjoying your little spotlight, Emma?" Emma smiled calmly. "It's not a spotlight, Victoria. It's a responsibility, something you wouldn't understand." As the evening progressed, Richard raised his glass. "Tonight, I want to honor someone. My daughter, Emma Blackwell. She has not only proven herself to me, but to this company, and to the world." She embodies resilience, intelligence, and heart. She is the future of Blackwell Enterprises. The room erupted in applause. Emma stepped forward, taking the microphone. Her voice was clear, unwavering. Not long ago, I was ignored, mocked for wearing a simple dress, overlooked, as if I didn't exist. But I learned something important. Your worth isn't defined by how others see you. It's defined by how you see yourself. To anyone out there who feels invisible, remember, your moment will come. And when it does, don't hide. Shine. Tears glistened in many eyes. Even some of her former critics applauded sincerely. That night, as the gala ended, Emma slipped outside for a breath of air. The city lights glittered like stars. The hum of life surrounding her? Richard joined her quietly. You've done more than I ever dreamed. I'm proud of you, Emma. Emma looked at him, a small smile playing on her lips. Thank you, but this isn't about being your daughter anymore. This is about being me. For the first time in her life, Emma felt whole. Not the servant-like secretary, not the ignored girl in a thrifted dress. She was Emma Blackwell, respected, powerful, and free. And as she gazed at the horizon, she knew this was only the beginning.